Hello everybody and welcome to round 15 at Singapore here in the AOR F3 PC League. As you can probably hear, I am not Thompson and I am doing the intro today. I am Aladar, I have been here. You probably ought to be fairly familiar with me. Thompson cannot make it today, but alongside me instead I do have Hayden, so...
Yep, hi.
So yeah, we're going to be bringing you today's race around the Marina Bay circuit, a street circuit in Singapore. I'm sure everyone's very, very familiar with it, and something of a bugbear of quite a few of the drivers. Not necessarily a favourite track of the AOR drivers, but you know, it does provide some interesting racing, and of course concentration levels have to be very high because, as we all know, you have to be alert on a street circuit. Yeah, the sauna-like conditions in the cockpit don't quite apply to our drivers unless they've forgotten to turn the heating off in their rooms, but nonetheless it can be a bit of an endurance test, as this is the longest race in terms of time of any of the ones on the calendar. What else have we got here on the track facts? So since 2009, of course this must be on the ground, they have retired. I see, okay, so yeah, so essentially pole position very, very important as ever, perhaps even more so here than it usually is. I'm just going to turn my mic up a little bit. Thank you for the feedback, Julian. Of course, we have the Hypersoft tyres available to us today, as well as the Ultrasofts and the soft tyres. So a step change between the medium and the hardest compound tyres. We'll see how that affects everyone in the race. One thing to note quickly is that both IE Pony and Collis, who were first and second in what was shaping up to be a very exciting title fight between the two of them, have both moved up a division and now are racing in F2. So that means that Corny, who was in third place with 119 points, has actually taken over and is probably our umpteenth leader of the championship this season. Just taking a little look around the track map here. We've got the DRS zones, all of that good stuff. 23 corners in total, emphasizing just how much of a test it is. Bring over to a little hot lap, courtesy of Tino Nakarinen and TM at Marduk.
What is up, guys? My name is Ben, otherwise known as Tim at Marduk, and today you join me for an AOR Hype Energy F1 League hot lap around the Singapore Grand Prix. Today we're on board with Tino Nakarinen in the Williams F1 car, heading into turn 1, braking at the 100-meter board, turning in very early there to maximise just the track width around the Singapore Grand Prix. Very tight for space. You want to maximise as much of that as possible. Heading into turn number 5 there, as you see the curbing on the left, that's when you want to brake. Nice flowing exit now on some very short back straight where obviously to overtake. Very braking for 150. Turn here, third exit to get the nose in. Now braking for this 90-degree set of corners. Second gear, short up to third, then fourth, downshift to third, using up all the track width to maximise that exit. Now heading to the old Singapore sling, which was sadly removed a few years ago. Much more flowing now. Swing the car in left before you swing right. Important to hit the curbing there right, otherwise the car can get spat out towards the wall, and that's not what you want. Through to the hairpin now. Nice rotation through there, short shifting up through the gears now onto this back straight. Nice overtaking area in the race as we brake at the 100-meter board. Late apex on the power, nice and early. Don't extend too much to the left, or that will be a disallowed lap. Braking now into the third sector. Very technical part of the lap, and where you can win or lose a lot of time. Now braking now for this stadium grandstand section. Again, really testing on the mechanical grip. All second and third gear corners through here. Nice exit. Try and kiss that curbing and also kiss the wall on the right hand side. Through to the final corner. And that is a lap of the Singapore Grand Prix. A very fast one indeed. Tino, you've absolutely nailed it.
Alright, welcome back everybody. We are into the qualifying session. We only have 11 drivers with us this time around. Unfortunately, a rather depleted grid, but several situations which of course cannot be helped, and the fact that Collis and IE Pony have been poached by F2 of course means that the grid will be smaller than it would otherwise be. So we apologise for that, but there's absolutely nothing we can do about it at this point. Just taking a look at our assassin now, driving around the track in his Sauber. He'll be hoping for a slightly better performance this time out than he has been having of late.
Yep. Obviously this is a very long track, so you've got to be careful not to keep your concentration up for the whole thing on these flying laps. You see Assassin's actually out on softs at the moment as well. I'd imagine just to get some warm up in, get used to track conditions, etc.
There's quite a few drivers actually out here on softs at the moment, which is I'm interested to see. I wonder if do you think anyone will actually be going for the qualifying on the hyper softs, or do you think the ultra softs will be more the way to go?
It depends on how much they want the track position, really. You can take the softs from lap 3 onwards, so it really depends on if they want the track position or not. I see Marian's actually out on the hypers at the moment. It all depends on, if they want track position.
And as we saw at the beginning, pole position is absolutely essential around here, so it wouldn't surprise me if several of the drivers do strap on a set of hypersofts further on into the session. Just on board with Marian now, as he seems to be on a flying lap here, coming down towards this fast left-hander here, clips the inside pretty nicely. He seems to be having a pretty tidy lap so far, takes a big chunk of curb on the inside there, but I don't think he'll have invalidated for that one. Very close to the wall at the end of the Anderson Bridge, and that will be a site of, well, could well be a site of a lot of crashes, particularly later on in the race once concentration starts to lapse.
Yep, coming up to the more tight and twisty section of the track now. Very important to get his braking just right into this corner, taking a very nice apex. Don't want to take too much curb on the left, getting close to the wall on the outside, braking just before the black box. Nicely rotating the car very well. Braking just before the black and white curb on the left. And now it's just a run through these final corners to the line, and we can see what time he's done. See Martin G's done a 38.68, and that would be his benchmark. And his lap must have been invalidated.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if it was that instant I saw. I thought it wouldn't be too much, but he kept pushing throughout the rest of the lap, so that's interesting to see. I guess he still seems to be pushing onto this second lap as well, so that's going to be burning up those Hypersoft tyres quite badly, but, you know, he seems to be going for it nonetheless. He runs very wide on the exit of turn 3 there and almost flips the wall, but I think he will have got away with that one. Enigma comes across the line and sets a time 0.8 of a second off of Martin G. So Martin G is looking like a pretty decent time so far, especially now that Hazard has also come across the line a considerable way behind the McLaren driver. There's yellow flags in Sector 3, not exactly sure who's caused that one. Corny seems to be going just fine. I think he was on an outlap actually, so I doubt it was him causing those yellow flags as he comes across the line here and onto his flying lap. He is, of course, our championship leader at the moment, as I have alluded to. So that is an interesting change of events and something I doubt he would have been expecting coming into this race to be leading the championship, but he does so nonetheless. Lasser is probably his main contender of the drivers who are present at this race at the moment, because both Roundrop and Ian, who find themselves currently in second and third places in the championship, neither of them have been able to attend today. Roundrop, which is something of a theme, not managing to be able to attend, and Ian suggesting he may well not be attending any of the future races depending on circumstances. So that could mean that Corny actually is in a very strong position for the championship all of a sudden. He clips the wall a little bit on the exit there, but I doubt that would have hurt him too much. Martin G improving his time as well to a 36.5.
So of course he's going to be aiming.
Sorry, I've got a bit of lag there. Sorry, my bad. Continue.
Yeah. I was going to say, Corny's obviously going to be going to Martin G's time of 36.5. He'll want that pole position to keep up his championship fight. See, Le Mans just gone round at turn 3. So that's not ideal for his flying lap. Going back on board with Corny, just about to come under the bridge. It's been a very neat lap so far, keeping it very tidy, making sure not to make too many mistakes, taking a lot of curb there. That could have been an invalidation. We'll see as he just comes through the final 2 corners up to the line. Is it going to be a valid lap? No.
Yeah, I think it must have been that one corner we saw him just hopping way over the curb there, and he's run wide on the exit of turn 1 as well. So I think he's actually in 0 ARS mode as well, as Tom actually puts himself just ahead of his team at only 46 thousandths of a second ahead of Martin G up there. But it's looking good for the McLaren boys at the moment, and Tom has shown himself to have pretty decent qualifying pace on the harder tyres available in general. He seems to have better pace on the harder tyres comparatively to the rest of the field. Just going to quickly run a check to make sure everything's working as intended with the stream. Yeah, everything all good. Okay, sorry about that. Back into the action here as Tom now is just on his cool down lap. Is anyone out there on a hot lap at the moment?
No, not at the moment. Just that kind of lull phase of qualifying where everyone's on their in or out laps.
Lasser going out of phase with everyone else, actually, as he goes out on the hyper soft tyres. So he's out of phase in that sense, but he's also out of phase in terms of timing as well, as he starts his first flying lap of the session, currently sitting down in 11th place, of course, but he's actually joint with 4 other drivers who have not managed to set acceptable lap times by the game's standards. As Lasser now heads towards this tricky right-hander. You can't run too wide on the exit, and he keeps it well away from the wall there. Not too much trouble for the Haas driver. Coming through the kink in the DRS straight here and down towards a tight left-hander. Heavy braking here. He runs quite wide on the exit, but glides it nicely and runs with that exit curb right between the front tyres, so you don't lose too much traction on it. Quite wide here in the left-hander. He's going to have to get out of it a little bit to avoid burying his nose in the wall there, so that would have lost him a couple of tenths of a second, I suspect. Heading now towards Anderson Bridge. He's got to hop over this curb nicely. Gets a little kick of oversteer on the exit, but nothing too bad, giving the wall a lot of respect on the outside there and on the inside as well, as he doesn't go very tight into the hairpin at all, but seemingly still on a pretty decent lap time now as he heads towards this right-hander, avoiding that curb entirely and getting a little bit leery once again on the exit curb, but nothing too bad.
Coming through this last sector. On Ultra Hypersoft, sorry, he's going to be aiming for a high 33 to a low 34, which is significantly faster than the other times on the board at the moment. So that might cause some other drivers to maybe possibly want to react to what he's doing. As we see, actually, he's backed out of his lap. He doesn't want to set that time on Hypersoft. Obviously, wants to start on the harder tyres.
Yeah, I wonder if he invalidated or if it was just... I didn't see any invalidation. So yeah, I think he has just decided he doesn't actually want to set a timer on those tyres. So that should indicate that he will actually be going on to the harder tyres for the remainder of the session. Several drivers now opting for ultra soft tyres, interestingly, at least provisionally, as they sit in their pit boxes. Hazard is the only one out on track with those ultra soft tyres as we speak, and he comes around the last corner and actually runs very, very wide on the exit of the final corner onto the start-finish straight, but it seems to be pushing regardless, so I don't think he will have invalidated his upcoming lap with that one. Running a little bit wide through the long left-hander there, but nothing too dramatic. Taking a lot of the curb on the left-hand side into the entrance of this corner, really maximising the angle of attack through the corner, and he will once again be heading up through the kink in this DRS straight. Can he get it brake nicely in here? Yeah, that's not too bad, I think. Probably lost a little bit of traction on both of the curbs there, but again, nothing too dramatic. Oh no, he's lost. Oh no!
No.
Wow, okay, well that is him out of the session. Hazard getting it wrong in the biggest possible way there. One of his wheels no longer on his wagon, and meanwhile Marion actually comes across the line and sets the first Hypersoft, or the first representative Hypersoft lap time that we've seen, a 1:34.7, and that's not very close to the 1:33s you were predicting, so I suspect that's not the best time ever out of Marion.
No, well, Marion's been known in the past to have used these qualifying sessions as a bit of a warm-up to practice for the race, so he's probably doing that at the moment as well. Yeah, it also seems that he's running on a slightly lower ballast setup from what I can tell, so he might be looking fully towards the race on saving his tyres here to go further into the race than others possibly. On
And
his
that would
Hypersofts.
also, yeah, that would explain the decision to be able to run out on the Hypersoft as well. So that's an interesting compromise to take, because no matter how much you compromise your qualifying setup, if you're going for a full race setup instead, it's not going to matter if you're still able to set your time on the Hypersoft tyres and no one else is, because surely the step difference between the tyres will mean that even though you have a compromised qualifying setup, it's still going to be faster than all the other drivers. So that seems like a pretty smart move, actually, out of Marion.
Yeah, seen some higher up drivers in higher up splits doing that, so looking off the best, obviously. Yeah.
So, as you are someone who has raced with all of these drivers recently, who, in your expert opinion, is most likely to snatch pole here, provided, assuming everyone's on the same tyres, and who do you think is most likely to watch out for the win of the race?
Recently Lassie and Le Mans been very fast in quali, but I definitely wouldn't count Martin G out in the race either. He's very fast on race pace. as we see, he's actually just exited the pits on ultra soft tyres as well. Yeah, I'd say the top 3 are probably going to be Lassie, Le Mans, and Martin G.
Okay.
Obviously, Tom actually once again has got good pace, so he's definitely a contender for a podium as well, and possibly front row of the grid.
Yeah, I mean, again, something we've seen out of Tom quite a lot is relatively good race pace in comparison to his 1-lap pace in qualifying, as Assassin comes across the line and only goes 5/10 off of the top time. But again, that is on hypersoft tyres, so perhaps a slightly disappointing lap time from the Sauber driver. We'll wait to see whether it actually pans out that way or not. Just going to go back on board with Lasser now as he's heading over the bridge. And yeah, so he's trying to set a lap time now on the ultra soft tyres, so the middle of the 3 tyres available. And he seems to have not invalidated this one so far, as he's still pushing. One aspect of this track that I find quite interesting is the fact that really you can, if you're not careful with the tyre, particularly with the softer tyres, the hypersofts and the ultrasofts, towards the end of the lap, as I understand it, you experience quite a lot of overheating with the tyres if you're going for a full pushing quali lap. So that's something the drivers will have to contend with going into Sector 3. And is it something you have to consider whether you take the time in the first couple of sectors, as Lasser actually goes across the line faster than either of the hypersoft runners, so that's a very good lap time from the Haas driver. But as I was saying, is that something you have to think about? Do you have to think, I'm going to take it a bit slower in Sector 1 to maximise my run through Sector 3, or is it not quite that complex?
Well, Sector 3 is probably the most traction-based sector, so throughout the first 2 sectors, yeah, your concentration will mainly be on just not spinning up those rear wheels to keep the temperatures down for the last sector, and you'll find a lot of time if you keep your tyre temps lower for that last sector. And same case in the race as well, if you want to see how long you can keep the tyre temps down before, so you can extend the stint, because wear on these hypersofts isn't really the issue. They'll be pitting because the temps are getting too high and the car's becoming undrivable, more than a case of the tyres are starting to fall off the cliff.
Oh, okay, it's quite interesting to actually get to the point where it's not actually the wear that's the issue, it's the heat. And there we go, Lemon across the line, just managed to catch on board with that one just at the end there, 59 thousandths of a second ahead of Lasser, so that's a very strong time set by the Force India driver, and at the moment it's a Force India 1 and 3, which would be a pretty big turn up for the team, who have not had the greatest of success so far this season. But of course Lemon has been improving dramatically as the season's gone on, and he's starting to build a little bit more consistency than we've seen from him before, although of course, as we've already mentioned, the fact that the walls are everywhere, very close to you around this track, and that it's such a long circuit and therefore a long race as well, does mean that his concentration will really be tested to the max here, and we'll see just how much he's improved by whether or not he's able to keep it out the wall, essentially.
Yeah.
Suisse comes across the line. Sorry to cut you off there. He's just the final person who had been without a lap time set at all, and he's actually come across the line in 6th place on those ultra-soft tyres. So a pretty okay lap from the Red Bull driver. Of course, Hazard not really able to set a representative lap time because of burying it in the wall, and at the moment I'd suggest that JSR and Enigma, and probably Tom as well, will be looking to improve remarkably on their time, because as I understand it, they have all set those lap times on soft tyres, and now they're all out on ultra-softs.
Interestingly, Marion is the only driver out on hypersofts at the moment. Everyone else seems to be out on ultrasofts, so he might be going for the track position strategy of starting near the front and holding the others up. Yeah, but everyone else at the moment is out on ultrasofts, I'd assume, because they are probably the best tyres to start this race on. So.
And do you think there'll be a significant difference in traction off the line comparing the hypersofts to the ultrasofts? So do you think if you manage to get on the grid in 2nd place with the hypersoft tyres, do you think you'll be able to likely get a run at the pole position driver into the first corner because you have the softer tyres off the grid and they get extra little bit of bite there off the start? Or do you think that's a pretty negligible factor?
I know there's a massive difference in the softs. There is a noticeable difference between the softs and the hypersofts as well, so definitely if you get a good start in 2nd place, you've got a good chance of jumping the pole position driver into turn 1. I'm sure that'll be a factor in Marion's decision to run the hypersoft as well.
Yeah, and certainly it's consistent with what your read on his setup, as Martin G actually retires from the session. I'm unsure where around the track that is, and I'm not able to jump on board with him and see. And Marion runs very, very wide coming out of the last corner there, and he's had to back out of it entirely. So that will be his session over, as there's only 30 seconds now remaining in the session. Lemon also retires from the session, currently in the pole position as it stands. Martin G actually improved his time a little bit, I believe, to a just 1.61 of a second behind Lemon here. And Lasser's actually also heading into the pit, so everyone's actually set their times rather early here, and it's not looking like that many people are going to be competing right towards the end of the session. Marion, of course, is backed out. Corny's in the pits. Suisse is in the pits. Assassin is out on a lap, so we'll follow him around in the Saubras. We finally finished the allotted time for qualifying, and the first 4 drivers, in fact the first 7 drivers, have all completed their sessions, so they're not going to be improving. So this really does give a bit of an opportunity for the likes of Assassin and perhaps Enigma and JSR as well, as Assassin gets a little bit leery on the exit of the corner there, but nothing too major. He won't want to do that too often, otherwise he will be very much overheating those tyres before he gets to Sector 3, now down to the fast left-hander before the bridge. Here he takes a nice amount of curb on the inside, keeps a pretty decent line, runs a little bit wide there through the right-hander though, and that will compromise him all the way across the bridge here. He actually bumped the wall on the exit, a bit of a lock-up as well, and he's run very, very wide indeed into the hairpin, so I doubt this is going to be a terribly good lap from Assassin. Enigma did improve his lap time, but only enough to put him up into 7th place, so I'm just going to jump on board with JSR, and he's backed out of it as well, so it is only Assassin who remains out here trying to set a lap time now as he heads towards the final sector of the track, pulling left, and always bumped into the wall on the outside again, getting pretty critical understeer by the looks of things in this Sauber, as he misses the apex of the right-handed there as well. And this is a very messy final sector for Assassin. We'll see if he actually dives into the pits, and yeah, he does. So he may well have invalidated that one as well, because he was running quite wide on some corners, but either way, that is your grid. The all 11 drivers have now completed the qualifying session. Yeah, there we go. We're just going to have to wait for JSR, I believe, to retire from the session. He's currently being wheeled back into his pit box, so it shouldn't be long now before we get to see the official results screen. But as you can see, it is Lemon who has pole position in the Force India, and I don't believe that's his first pole position, but it's definitely a good qualifying performance from the Polish driver. Yes, in fact, I remember saying at some point we've had a pole on pole, so he must have had a pole position at some point, and there it is. 0.06 of a second behind him is Lasser, also on the ultra soft tyres. Martin G in 3rd and Tom in 4th complete a McLaren 2nd row of our grid. Marion with a slightly disappointing 5th place on the hypersoft tyres. He had to bail out of that last lap as he ran very, very wide right at the end of the lap as well. So that was a bit of a heartbreak for Marion in the Force India. Corny in 6th, a bit disappointing for him perhaps, because he is, as we mentioned already, our current championship leader. Enigma, Suisse, Assassin, JSR and Hazard rounds off the grid after crashing it quite early on in the session.
Yep. Now it's on to the formation lap, where drivers starting on possibly the soft tyres will have to take it very cautiously to make sure that they get their tyres right up to temperature for that start, so they don't lose too much ground off the line. Fortunately, I think the only drivers starting on softs are at the back of the grid, so that's okay for them. They won't be losing too many positions if they get a bad start. The drivers up the front need to be aware, obviously, of what's going on around them, and yeah, making sure those tyres are in the sweet spot for that start.
Are we going to see the likes of Marion really sort of crawling around with the hype soft tyres, trying not to get them too hot before the start of the race, or will he be sort of still kind of around the same sort of program as the rest of the drivers?
He'll probably be doing about the same pace as everyone else. Yeah, he might weave a bit less on the run up to line, but that's all I'd really expect, to be honest.
Okay. So have you noticed much of a difference between the drivers in terms of the way they approach the formation lap? Because the formation lap recently has become a much more important aspect of the race than we've seen in previous F1 games. So, and I mean, when I used to drive, it used to be basically you take the formation lap as slow as possible just to minimize any potential tire wear you got on that lap. So now it's a rather different sort of thing, where you're actually trying to get the heat into your tires with the new system with the tire carcasses, as well as the outside of the tyres mattering in terms of heat. So yeah, so do you notice any sort of different approaches between particular drivers, or is it all pretty much the same?
It tends to be relatively consistent, just a relatively average pace lap. Yeah, there's nothing really massive to be gained out of this formation lap, but it's really important that they, of course, don't overheat their tyres on the formation lap. But there's not really any massive fluctuations in what could happen on the formation lap. Some drivers prefer maybe to push a bit more on the formation lap to get a feel of the fuel load, but that's the only reason I'd see a driver going quite fast on the formation lap, really.
And so, if you were driving here, what sort of fuel load would you be running for this race? Because I would expect, based on my previous experience, that you'd run a little bit less than you would usually, comparatively, when you're on a street circuit like Singapore. But that might not apply so much anymore. I don't really know.
Well, I'd always run a little bit less fuel around here. You use a lot less. Most of the track you can run in lean mix and get away with it. There's a lot more to be gained out of using your ERS deployment correctly around this track than there is to be in the correct fuel mix, really.
So yeah,
of course, the light of the car.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say ERS deployment as crucial as ever, and it's be interesting to see how the different drivers employ it differently throughout the race.
Yeah, and following up what I was saying earlier, the lower the fuel you're on, the better your tyre wear will be as well. Not that tyre wear is a massive factor out on this track, but every little helps.
Indeed, as ever, it's Formula One tends to be a game of milliseconds, and if you can eke those milliseconds out of anything, you will always be looking to do it, as our shortened grid now forms up in their grid positions. Very much looking forward to seeing how everyone gets off the line here, whether Marion will have a rocket start from 5th position, or whether Lemon will be able to hold on to his pole position as we see it here as 5 lights go on, and out they go, and oh, that's already a drive-through penalty for Tom97HD with the jump start there. Let's see how the drivers are looking into turn 1. It's actually Tom, of course, on the inside, having jumped the start, and he's actually proving quite difficult for Lasser, and I think Martin G lost some of his front wing on his teammate there. I'm not sure if that was Martin G, but I think it was, as Lemon is actually leading away very, very comfortably at the moment, and behind them there's quite a lot of battling going on. Martin G and Corny going pretty wide in the corner there, and Corny looked like he actually clouted the wall pretty heavily. I'm not sure if he got any damage from that one, but he has lost the position to Swiss now as well. So Tom's jump start there causing a bit of chaos throughout the field and really advantaging Lemon at the front, as now Suisse and Martin G are going side by side once again, and Corny and Marion side by side behind them as well. Marion looking to make sure that our championship leader Corny loses another place, and he does do so indeed. Corny down to 7th place off the start of this race here, and at the moment it is Lemon out in front with Tom97HD in second, but don't forget that and Marion into the wall there, pushed wide I think, and he's actually retired from the session. He didn't lose any of his wheels, but I think that might be a bit of an emotional decision from Marion there, as he actually retires from the session having lost some of his front wing.
Yep, quite a messy opening lap there. A lot of drivers losing their front wing, including our championship leader Corny has got some wing damage on the left side of his front wing. So you see Tom Le Mans has already pulled a quite sizable gap to Tom of almost 2 seconds. And Tom is also under pressure from Lassie, but he really doesn't have to worry about Tom with his drive-through penalty. Of course, Tom is going to carry on pushing. He wants to lose as little as possible as he decides to pull in on the first attempt to make that drive-through penalty.
Interesting. Is that a decision you would have made to go in as soon as you could? I would have thought you'd want to have a little bit of a running out there on the track before you went into the pits, but maybe this is the right decision from him. As actually was saying, JSR quickly going around the outside of Assassin into turn 1, so a good move from the Renault driver. But yeah, as I was saying, is that something you would have
done? Usually you wait until gaps size out, but he's possibly looking for some clean air to just get on with his race without disruption of other drivers, and also possibly keep his front wing clean. Yeah, that's the only reason I see him making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense as well. And of course, having a drive-through penalty isn't as cataclysmically bad of an event as you might expect around some other tracks, because of course so many drivers, as we've seen, several have already lost various bits of carbon fiber from their cars, and that is going to be a continuing theme throughout the race, I suspect, with the walls as close as they are. So plenty of other drivers will be making mistakes, so the race definitely isn't over for Tom, and he could definitely still get some pretty decent points. And of course, the fact that he's at the back of the field and still in the points position means that it's all still to play for the McLaren driver back there. And Suisse, by the way, has made an absolutely amazing start. He's up 4 positions right now, and he's actually pressuring Martin G as well. And Martin, I think, must have had some front wing damage from that collision with his teammate on the left front of his wing. I can't quite see it on the camera, but Suisse is really all over the back of that McLaren driver right now, and Lasser is already driving away from him as well. And interestingly, Lemon's still 2 seconds out ahead of Lasser, and Lemon's pace is looking very, very solid here.
Yeah, from what I can tell, Martin G might have a little bit of damage to the right-hand side of his front wing, as we see Suisse now coming onto lap 3. DRS will be available down the second straight now. So he'll be wanting to keep it very close to the back of Martin G and get best exit possible to possibly have a look into turn 4. We'll be looking for a gap of 3 or 4 tenths coming onto the straight to be looking at a move. And at the moment he's got that, so he's in very good shape to be considering a move into this next corner. We'll see if Martin G goes defensive. And he has chosen to, so Suisse is going to have to go all the way around the outside if he wants to make this, and that's very tight. And he's managed to go all the way around the outside. He's going to hold the inside into this next corner, and that's a very nice move there from Suisse. Martin G not really do anything about that.
Yeah, really good stuff, actually. Very clean from the Red Bull driver. He did pinch Martin G into the apex of the left-hander there, but there's enough space on the outside of that corner that you can run wide a little bit and get away with it. So really playing to the track there from the Red Bull driver, and we'll see if he's able to chase on after Lasser. But there's already a 5-second gap between him and the second-place driver. The pace of Lemon and Lasser is really very different from the rest of the field at the moment, but of course, Suisse was being held up behind a car with some damage. So we'll be able to see whether he is able to push on, but regardless, a very impressive start from him, and he's now up 5 positions from his start. Meanwhile, Enigma is now all over the back of Martin as well in that Ferrari, and he's made it past Corny, who is struggling as well, languishing a bit down in 6th place at the moment. He's not closing up to the back of Martin. I suspect he has a fairly similar level of damage, if not a bit more than the McLaren driver. Assassin and JSR also seem to be quite close to each other, battling throughout the circuit right now, but actually other than that, pretty sizable gaps seem to have opened up across the field, which could be good news for some of the drivers, as they might well be able to keep it clean based on that, which is something that some of the drivers have been having quite a bit of trouble with in general throughout the season, and this track will not make it any easier for them, so maybe a bit of space is a good thing for some of these drivers.
Yeah, but obviously, keep the wing clean. Did you see Enigma coming onto the second DRS straight? He could be looking to replicate the same move that Suisse did last lap, but Martin G does have DRS on this attempt, so it's going to be a lot harder to make the same sort of move. You see Martin G's not going to defensive, he's going to have the inside line, he's got to be late on the brakes. You see Martin G manages to hold it around the outside there, and very good defending, parking his car perfectly on the racetrack, stopping Enigma from getting past there, and there's not really too many chances for the rest of the lap, so he'll be probably planning towards next lap now to make that move again. So they've fallen back from Suisse almost a second. We see actually Lasser has closed up in the last lap about 6 tenths to Le Mans, so he's got some pace at the moment, and he'll be looking at attacking for that lead position.
Yeah, hopefully so, because we really could use a fight out at the front at the moment. And Lasser is someone who is most likely to challenge Corny if Corny's not able to get some form going towards the end of the season and try and take what is currently a championship lead, which has really fallen into Corny's lap. He's going to be looking to take that away from him, and Lemon might well do as well based on his pace, but he is quite a long way behind as far as the points are concerned at the moment. Very impressive, I thought, by Enigma, by the way, not to send it up the inside of I'm not sure which number the corner is, I'm afraid, but the left-hander, which tightens very rapidly on the exit. He backed out of that one very early, made sure that he wasn't going to be pushing Martin G into the wall on the outside there, and as you said, Suisse has now driven away up the road from the battling McLaren and Ferrari here, and Enigma's really having to check his brakes every time going into the corner, because Martin G really does have to take the apexes of the corners at a much slower speed than Enigma is able to, and he actually runs a little bit wide here, but oh no! Oh, Martin made a mistake, he bumped the wall, but then Enigma also made a mistake and lit up the rear tyres. They're not getting the traction he needed to make a challenge on Martin on this lap, so this might mean another whole lap of Enigma being stuck behind a much slower car here, which is not good news for the Ferrari driver, although Martin actually runs very, very, very wide there, but he's able to just about keep it out of the wall. Enigma doesn't really have anywhere to go.
He's going to be waiting for next lap now to be looking at making a move. As you see, Corny, despite them two battling, he really can't keep up with the amount of wing damage he has, and he'll be looking at pitting within these next few laps to get off those tyres as soon as possible, and that front wing. Enigma will be waiting until the second DRS straight again, unless he can have a look into turn 1 on this lap, but I think it'd be a more sensible idea to wait until the end of the second straight. It will be severely affecting his race though, being stuck behind, of course, Martin Gio. As wing damage, you see, is going quite wide there through those two corners. Taking a slightly compromised line through this last sector now, coming under the bridge. Just keeping it very neat and tidy, you don't want to make any mistakes through here. Pick up the DRS down the main straight to put you right in that prime position down the second straight to be looking at a move into turn 6.
Yeah, he's managing to deal with the dirty air of Martin fairly well, coming through the double left-hander onto the start-finish straight, but of course it's very unlikely you're going to be able to make a move on someone into turn 1. The straight's simply not long enough. Martin G taking a much wider line as Corny actually does dive into the pits, just as you were mentioning that he would be doing so very soon. He goes onto the soft tyres pretty much as soon as he could and gets rid of that front wing, so that will send him to the very back. And now here we go, Enigma on the DRS straight once again, will be following Martin G. Dives towards the inside before Martin G can really think about defending, actually, and that looks like a much more convincing move from Enigma, as they both run pretty wide on the exit, but they don't make contact, and Enigma is through and up ahead of the McLaren driver, but he runs a bit wide there and actually gets a big kick of oversteer as well, but Martin G just doesn't have the pace to do anything about it with that lack of front wing he has there, and actually Enigma letting him back through. So clearly Enigma felt there was something wrong with his move there, but I can't see what it was.
Well, he did force Martin off the track slightly, but not too badly. He obviously felt it wasn't clean enough, and possibly he feels he just wants to have some fun battling with a driver. He doesn't really have anyone else to worry about on track at the moment, so you never know. As we see, the leading battle is now held station at 1.6 seconds. Maybe Lassie's deciding to protect his tyres a little bit. It'll come towards him towards the end of the race, or towards the end of this stint as well. Enigma right behind Martin G again. He'll be looking for another move this lap, possibly slightly cleaner than the last one, so he doesn't feel the need to let him back through, but we'll see. Martin G may be looking at pitting within the next few laps as well. Possibly he's waiting for the cork in the bottle to get past him. Very close into turn 1 again. He'll be really thinking about that as Martin G runs slightly wide through these two corners, and that's going to give Enigma the perfect chance down this second DRS straight. Coming down into turn 4, right behind him, taking a very nice apex as Martin G actually runs quite wide, and this could be a relatively textbook DRS move. See, as he goes through down the outside of turn 5, he's going to have the inside for the next corner, braking late, holding the inside, and very neat and simple move.
Completely clean as a whistle there, so if Enigma lets him back through, we know he's definitely doing it just to have a little bit of fun and doesn't think he's going to be able to catch up with Suisse anytime soon. Assassin also came into the pits at the end of that last lap. He was on the Hypersoft tyres though, so that is about as expected. About lap 6 he managed to get those Hypersoft tyres too, and the only other Hypersoft runner so far, Marion, binned it into the wall on turn 1, although I suspect he had a little bit of help in getting it into the wall there, but I didn't quite see it clearly, so enough to say with confidence that it wasn't entirely his own doing, but it's just a sneaking suspicion I have. Meanwhile, Tom hasn't made that much of an imprint on Hazard's lead ahead of him since the pit stop. He's only 9 seconds behind him now, and that has come down a bit from where it was. I can't remember exactly where it was at the start, but I think it's only about 3 seconds that it's come down, and considering that 6 laps on ultra soft tyres and someone that Tom would likely feel like he had the pace over, at least in terms of race pace around here, and Hazard not looking too strong in this race. So that maybe Tom struggling a little bit as well. Maybe he has a tiny bit of front wing damage. There was a bit of argy-bargy going on at the very start of the race, but I'm unsure whether that will have affected him or not. It didn't seem like he was really the recipient of any damage there. One thing to note between Lasser and Lemon is that actually it's equalized a little bit now, but earlier on, last lap, Lasser had about 30% available ERS stored in the battery, whereas Lemon was on 79%. So Lemon really has a lot in hand in terms of ERS deployment if he needs to make a defense against the Haas driver, but of course he just seems to be controlling it really nicely at the moment, and this is a very impressive drive from Lemon, and it's not the sort of drive that we're used to seeing from him. He's tended to be a bit more of an erratic driver but he really is controlling this very nicely, I think.
Yeah, his driving style has really matured going through the season. I've also noticed that Lassie's running slightly less fuel. You see that fuel light sometimes under braking just blinking on. So he's running lighter on fuel, and supposedly against what I said earlier, it seems like Le Mans might actually be running the slightly more conservative strategy here of protecting the tyres, saving his ERS. And Lassie's SF strategy, we'll have to see as it plays out across the pit stops, if one of them possibly decides to go for an undercut on each other. But we'll see this lap if Lassie's going to think about pitting, and he does. He's coming in this lap to get rid of those ultra softs and take the soft seat. He'll be looking for a 2 and a bit second undercut. I don't think that's quite possible, but depends, as we saw his tyres went off quite a lot that lap, so if the same happened to Lemon this lap, then possibly he'd have a good chance at giving the undercut a good go here. If not, he'll at least be in the DRS zone. As Enigma now inherits second place, Lassie's going to come out right behind some other drivers. That's not going to help his strategy of undercut too well.
Yeah, that's really going to harm him, actually. He's right behind Hazard there, and he's going to catch up to the back of him in no time at all, I would suggest. Suisse and Martin G also came into the pits this lap, and they both come out, interestingly, behind Tom97HD, but of course Tom will actually have to do another pit stop, because of course he hasn't actually changed his tyres yet. He just had that drive-through penalty, but that shows that Tom's pace wasn't all that bad, although I'm surprised quite how far he is behind Lasser now that they both pitted.
Yeah, it's surprising considering the pace that Tom usually has. He has been a bit out of practice with Formula 1 games in the recent, so that might possibly be why his race pace is slightly suffering a bit. See, the gap to the leader for Lassie at the moment is 28 seconds, which is not quite enough. If he wants to be undercutting and getting the position, he'll be looking at something closer to 27 seconds or 26 and a half. So at the moment, he's not quite closed up the amount he wouldn't, and that may be due to the car in front of him of Hazard. There's unfortunately not really much he can do about that until the next lap now.
Yeah, and of course he doesn't have a whole team on the pit wall saying that you can't pit this lap because you're going to come out right behind another driver. So, and really, I think the decision to pit from him was the only one he could have made, because he really started to drop back very significantly from Lemon on that lap, as Lemon is now into the pits himself. So we'll see where he comes out relative to Lasser. I suspect he's actually going to be well clear of both Hazard and Lasser here, as the safety car's doing an interesting thing there. But we'll move on from that, as here comes Lemon out of the pits. Pretty tough pit exit, and he actually looks like he's going to come out right behind JSR unless he can challenge him into turn 1. JSR, fairly sensible driver, so I suspect he won't actually be fighting the Force India, and indeed he tucks in behind there and does not challenge the race leader. So Lemon actually manages to pit from first place and come back out in first place. Very impressive stuff.
That's very good for him. He'll be going for the Grand Slam in this race, I'd imagine, if he can lead every single lap.
Ooh, here comes Lasser, sorry, up the inside of Hazard. He really needs to make this move as quick as he can, because he has another driver he's going to have to navigate his way around in the form of JSR shortly, but he does manage to get a pretty clean move up the inside of the Mercedes driver, and he will be looking to press on now.
Yep, he'll be looking to close the gap to Le Mans, who's actually gained out of the pit stops there. That's how much he was held up behind Hazard there. Le Mans has actually managed to gain time on Lassie, so that's very good for him in his strategy. You see, Lasser might be looking at a move on next lap on JSR. He's closing up very quickly on his fresh tyres. JSR is on 10 lap old tyres now, so they'll be feeling a bit second hand. But I wouldn't expect him to be pitting until around lap 20, so he's only halfway through his step.
Yeah, and Lasser will just be hoping to get himself as close to the back and spend the whole rest of this lap just preparing himself to be able to make that move on the Renault driver. He's just got it down in 1 on the ERS mode right now, the low deployment setting. He moves it up into medium just to make sure he stays right behind it, but he has been saving a bit more ERS than we saw on the opening lap, certainly, as he definitely isn't looking to make a move into turn 1 here as he keeps the ERS deployment low. He's being very, very patient about it, and knowing that he has to maximize his chance by making a move into turn 4 at the end of the second DRS straight, and he'll once again just tuck in behind JSR, take the slipstream here, focus on getting a nice clean run out of this corner here. Very nicely done indeed, and he will easily make it up the inside of the Renault driver on this lap, and I suspect that JSR will not be fighting it too much, as actually Enigma's had to retire from the session, so I'm going to jump down to see why that is. We're just going to keep on board with Martin G and see, with Assassin rather, and see there is Enigma, a really odd place. He's on the right-hand side, buried in the wall, facing the absolute wrong way in turn 2. So I cannot fathom how he's managed to put it there, unless there was some help. But I don't think he was very near anyone else on track, so I really don't know what's happened to the Ferrari driver there.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate placement. He could have been hit by another car. We'll have to see. As you see, Swiss has got past Martin G as well while all of that was happening. So that will be important for his race now. He'll be looking at maybe closing down Hazard, but he's got a big gap to go if he wants to be closing that down. And Lassa now will be looking at settling in for the long run. Still 20 laps to go. And looking at the long game to try and close up to the leader, Lemon. JSR is now also still out on his soft. They're looking pretty second-hand. You see Tom's getting a penalty for multiple warnings there. I think that's the first one of the race, surprisingly, 11 laps into it.
Yeah, and I actually jumped on board with Tom just a split second before we saw him hopping over those curbs. So it was, once again, a bit of a spectator's curse going on there. And actually, Suisse as well getting a 3-second time penalty. He was on screen as well, because I was, of course, on board with Tom, so I could see him as Tom actually now comes into the pits to finally get rid of those ultra-soft tyres he started the race on. A bit of a Larry pit entry there, but I think he's got it slowed down and everything nicely, so no big dramas. Interestingly, Corny actually only had a 3-lap undercut on Martin G, but they both had damaged front wings beforehand, and he's come out quite a long way ahead of Martin G after the pit stops have all shaken out, so that's a pretty good undercut there from Corny, but he is still 6 seconds behind Suisse and not looking to make too much of an imprint there. Martin G actually has been closing the gap a little bit to Corny since the pit stops as well.
Yeah, interestingly, Corny, it seems like, has decided not to repair his front wing, so that's an interesting decision from him, lad. Surprisingly, with how much time he's been losing because of that. Also, I've just noticed there's actually Hazard's got wing damage as well on the front left. So that could play into Hazard's hands very well.
Yeah, no, so Suisse should be closing down the gap on the Mercedes driver ahead of him here. So I'm not going to stick on board with Hazard for too long because his engine is revving out at the moment. So we're going to go back to Suisse and watch him as he begins to close the gap down. The gap between Lemon and Lassa is staying pretty constant at 2.2 seconds roughly at the moment. So yeah, no, nothing doing at the front of the race at the moment. And of course, Lemon will, for the remainder of the race, actually have ever so slightly fresher tyres than Lassa, having pitted 1 lap earlier than the Haas driver behind. So it's looking very, very good indeed for Lemon, as he, I think, is still looking to pick up his first race win. So yeah, this will be, he's in a very good spot for it right now, certainly. Martin G, meanwhile, is still catching up to the back of Corny, and that may well be because of, as you mentioned, Corny not changing his front wing in the pit stop, which would be rather extraordinary if it is the case. I think it must be some sort of graphical error or something like that, because I can't imagine that Corny wouldn't have done it. But then again, the pace does seem to suggest that he's not really got much going on in that Mercedes right now. But then again, we didn't see that much out of him in qualifying either. Ooh, Martin G running very, very wide there, clipping the outside left of his car around the outside of that corner into the wall, but I think he hasn't sustained too much damage from it, if any at all, so he'll be able to carry on good as new.
Yeah, Suisse is actually also slowly but surely closing up on Hazard with his wing damage, so that could be a battle in 4 or 5 laps time possibly. And interestingly, Lemon at the moment is pulling slowly gap to Lassie. That could be interesting. It could be down to strategy, who's trying to save their tyres and who isn't. But Lemon still does have the more ERS, and he's not running particularly low on fuel either. So it's interesting. It seems that the Mon will be looking to keep it within that 3-second window in case the Lemon does get a penalty, because he is prone to be doing that in the past. As he has also been prone to having quite bad tyre wear, so we could see his tyres go off in the last few laps. To wait and see.
Yeah, indeed. But he has seemingly been holding on to those tyres, particularly in the first stint. He did seem to do a good job with them, so I'd be surprised if they are going to go off too badly in this race. Martin G picking himself up a 3-second time penalty, as well as Tom came out of the pits after making his stop all the way down in 9th position at the moment. But again, that's still 2 championship points because of the retirements of Enigma and Marion. So it's really not all that bad for the McLaren driver as it could be. Not as bad as you'd expect after making a jump start at the start of the race, but still disappointing considering quite a strong grid position for him on the second row down in 4th position. Assassin also picking up a 3-second time penalty, and he has fallen well adrift of the field as well. And speaking of well adrift, he was well adrift of the apex of that right-hander as well, not really troubling it at all as he heads now down towards the end of the not very straight, and that was a lot neater actually on that left-hander of turn 4, so a little bit of improvement there for him, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. Watching on board some of these drivers as well, so they're all taking very different aspects to how they're driving. Some seem to be using a lot less lock than others. That could be down to ballast, could be down to setup. Some seem to be pushing a lot more and using the rears up a lot more, but some seem to be driving very cautiously, and it's interesting to see how close their paces are despite these 2 different approaches. It might play out towards the end of the race though more.
So who have you noticed in particular having the more aggressive style, maybe getting a bit more tyre wear than some of the others?
I've noticed Martin G has a lot more of aggressive style than the likes of Suisse or as Hazard, as he's actually or JSR. He's using his tyres a lot more than others. It's interesting to see, but that could be down to more lock because they're running a lower ballast and the car isn't turning, and they have to use more lock to turn the car. So it goes hand in hand, and it's interesting to see that these setups seem to be quite well against each other. Seem to be quite similar in pace for this race.
Martin G, though, is actually catching well up to the back of Corny now, and Corny has been closing on Suisse as well, so if he does still have damage on his car, it's not inhibiting too much, but Martin G just seems to be stronger around the circuit at the moment than Corny up ahead of him, and only 6/10 of a second behind him now, the only driver within DRS range of another one. Hazard has been hovering on the very edge of DRS range from JSR for quite a while now, as he might dip into it there, and Corny actually gets himself a 3-second time penalty. Once again, that was caught on camera, so this is becoming something of a trend, as no, Martin runs very, very wide into the hairpin there, and that's going to give Corny a little bit of breathing space after that mistake. Meanwhile, something I'm noticing about JSR is that he, for a lot of the lap, he's running at 100% on his ERS. He's just simply not deploying his ERS for the most part. He spends the vast majority of the lap in low deployment setting, and then bumps it up on the straights to hot lap and overtake, and then all the way back down just to save battery for the whole rest of the track. And that surely must be a decision based on tyres and traction, because he's really not maximising the electrical output otherwise.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't feel comfortable on his current set of tyres. It's interesting to see that he leaves it on low though. I'd expect if you're saving tyres to at least still have it on medium through some sections of the track. Maybe that's just his preference though. Each drivers will have different preferences. He has probably not going to be actually close enough for movement on this lap as he clouts the ball on the outside there. That won't help his wing damage a bit. And Suisse is now within DRS, so we're going to have 3 cars very close to each other on the next lap. So that could be interesting to see. I just see actually Martin G is right on the back of Corny now as well. He'll be also looking for a move on the next lap.
Yeah, good to see some fighting going on after a little bit of a lull in the action in this race. But actually, not to mention the fact that Corny is also catching up on Suisse a little bit. Of course, he'll be a bit delayed in that if Martin G does harass him too much. But we could see 5 cars all clumping up together going in further into the race. Though, of course, Hazard and JSR will at some point have to pit. Although it's going to be a little while still before they pit away from those soft tyres. Perhaps JSR's doing really saving those tyres, and that might explain the ERS deployment issue, because perhaps he's really trying to get onto Hypersauce for the end of the race for his final stint. But even then, it seems like it's quite a big price to pay.
Yeah, for that sort of strategy, he's paying quite a big price. But we never know what's going on inside a driver's mind. He might know something that we don't. We'll have to see how it plays out towards the end of the race to see. This is going to be quite close. They're all within 4/6 of each other here. As interestingly, Swiss is actually managing to get a better run on Hazard here, so he might be looking for a move on him and then a move on JSR afterwards. You see, actually Hazard's gone very wide through turn 1 there, and Swiss has to take avoiding action. Now coming down into turn 4, he's lost quite a bit of time there, and he's almost a bit out of the range to make an overtake here, so he may be waiting another lap to be making an overtake here. Not really an issue though, he doesn't have many other cars on track to worry about at this point in time, with Corny, who has wing damage, being 3 seconds back down the road. And he might just be playing the patient game here, so he's making sure he gets the proper opportunity moment. Proper opportune moment. Sorry, mixing my words up there. Martin G. Yeah. Martin G right on the back of Corny now. Unfortunately, couldn't make a difference on that lap, so he'll be definitely looking to do it on the next, if he can get past.
He did stick his nose up the inside into turn 4, but couldn't really get any sort of leverage into that corner. Nothing really that demanded any right of way from Corny, and Corny was able to handle it nicely. Yeah, Hazard and Swiss, in fact JSR and Hazard both seem to be really quite far off the pace now, as Corny actually went about 1.4 seconds faster on that previous lap, so they are actually catching up pretty significantly as Com picks up his second 3-second time penalty of the race, back there in 9th place at the moment. He is closing in on Assassin, but after he passes Assassin, if he even manages to catch up to the Sauber driver, it's going to be a long while before he catches up anyone else, because there is 16 seconds between Assassin and the 7th place driver, who is Martin G, who we are currently on board with, coming on to the start-finish straight. I'm going to jump up to Swiss though, because if there is any action, it's going to be these three who have it first, and Swiss has an excellent view here, not only of his own action, but if Hazard is able to make a move on JSR as well, he will be in prime position to watch it, as JSR actually very neatly through there, and Hazard having a bit of oversteer mid-corner means that Swiss is actually going to be able to claim the outside line for this left-hander, forcing Hazard into a defensive line here. Hazard defends it very nicely, and Swiss actually clouts him a little bit there, gets a little bit of oversteer and can't send it up the inside into this right-hander. Meanwhile, going on behind the Martin G is once again very, very close to the back of Corny, but not able to do anything about it, and so another lap he remains stuck behind the Mercedes driver. But look how much that gap has come down once again between Corny and Swiss. There really is a very, very slow pace going on, particularly from JSR, and I assume Hazard as well on those very old soft tyres.
They all seem to be converging on each other, which is great for us to watch, but for the drivers it'll be the most frustrating feeling not being able to get past, and they know they can be a lot faster. Yeah, this is playing completely into Corny's and Martin G's hand, and it puts Martin G back in prime position, if he has the pace, to pass all of these lot, and possibly be on a podium position at the end of the race. He also doesn't have any penalties, unlike some of the drivers around him, so that could be interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, it's easy to forget that this is actually the battle for third position, effectively, because JSR and Hazard aren't really in this battle to the same extent that Swiss, Corny and Martin are, because they are still yet to pit, and while they will pit onto fresher, softer tyres than the other drivers, it's unlikely they're going to be able to remake that 26-second gap, or however much it is that you take from going into the pits. As once again, Hazard and Swiss very close to the back of JSR, and Hazard getting very, very deep into turn 3 once again, and compromising his exit pretty significantly. That must be the understeer he's experiencing from the front wing, as he's once again not in any position to challenge JSR, but Swiss doesn't look like he's in any position to challenge him either. Meanwhile, Martin G behind does take a look up the inside of Corny, but isn't able to do anything about it. Once again, Corny just a little bit too far ahead. No, Hazard into the wall, and Swiss has actually had to run wide because of that, and that means Corny and Martin G have been gifted these positions here, so the Mercedes and the McLaren both up 2 positions in fact from where they were, because Hazard just finally, the front wing loss got the better of him, and he understeered into the wall on the left-hand side. Corny actually gets a 5-second stop-go penalty for ignoring a yellow flag. That's pretty unfortunate, because I could only assume that's for the overtake on Swiss, which he really couldn't avoid, so hopefully he'll be able to get that one appealed later on. But if it's a stop-go penalty, and he won't be pitting again, so he should be able to appeal it after the race, thankfully, and I imagine if he does so, that one will get removed, and Swiss actually picks himself up a 3-second time penalty as well, which will not help his morale after having something go really wrong with Haz going into the wall in front of him.
Yeah, I also just noticed Swiss has also got some wing damage on the right front of his wing from that. a lot of the aero devices actually that have been banned for 2019, so he might be able to get a bit of practice in for the next game, who knows. But just the JSR's pulling into the pits there. Martin G now, as I said a couple of laps ago, is now in prime position to take that podium. All he's got to do is overtake Corny, which he's trying to do for the last few laps, and he's going to have to give it another good shot to see if he can get past the Mercedes driver and also our championship leader. He's about 4 tenths behind, and for this time Corny won't have any DRS, so he could have a look into turn 6 here, but I don't think he's quite going to be close enough. He's going to be on the outside, and Corny parks it very well on the inside, and he's just going to have to hold back here as he gets very close on the brakes, almost chipping off a little bit of his front wing there, but very neat, very tidy from both of them, as you'd expect from these drivers.
Yeah, Corner really giving him a bit of a tour of the outside of the track there and making sure that there was no way that Martin G could be getting any sort of traction coming out of turn 4 to come up alongside him into turn 5. Good defensive driving from Corny, and he just has to maintain that throughout the rest of the race. Now there are 11 laps still remaining though, but unless Corny sticks it in the wall, he just seems to have the better run out of turn 3 consistently, or simply the better straight line speed compared to Martin G, and Martin really does seem to be struggling to actually get properly alongside him into turn 4.
Yep, he'll be looking at another overtake coming onto the back straight again on this lap. I've also just had a check of the penalties up for the top 2. Both of them have 2 warnings at the moment, so they're on level ground. Of course, they both won't want to get a warning, especially Lasser, who could inherit the lead if he doesn't get another warning, and Lemon does. See Martin G suffering a little bit in the dirty air there, but because of Corny's wing damage, he still gains a little bit, and he's within that 3/10 window that he needs to be able to make a pass, and he's got another penalty. I think that's his second of the race now. He really won't want that, and he's going to have an even bigger hurry up at trying to get this move done now, so he can possibly make a gap. But at this moment in time, it does seem to be that Corny is the faster driver out of the pair.
Yeah, he just, I mean, it's just in sectors 2 and 3, Martin, particularly in sector 3, Martin seems to really catch up to the back of Corny, but runs very, very wide into turn 4 there. He just can't seem to keep it together in the big traction zones in sector 1, and that just seems to be costing him quite a lot compared to the Mercedes driver up ahead. Of course, Corny does, at the moment, have that pending 10-second penalty from that stop-go, but as I said, that will almost certainly be removed, so I think we can probably disregard that. And meanwhile, Tom and JSR are actually going side by side here. JSR having just pitted onto fresh ultra soft tyres and going all the way around the outside of turn 4. A very nice move from the Renault driver. Tom not really able to mount any sort of challenge on 9-lap old soft tyres, and JSR moves himself up into 7th place.
Very good move from him. He'll now only 5 seconds away from Assassin on his fresh ultra soft. He might be looking for 6. And Lasso's got a penalty there. That's really going to affect his battle for the lead. He's going to have to hope now that he has the pace to catch them on. And he also gets a penalty.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a pretty tall order for the Haas driver now, especially considering he just hasn't been showing any sort of likeliness to really close in on the Force India driver ahead, and Lemon has been just so, he's been Mr. Consistent today, and I think that's really excellent to see from him, because it's something to go with the pace, and it's really nice to see, because he's almost the only driver now, I'm thinking, without a penalty to his name, so really good stuff from Lemon up there in the Force India. I'm not sure if JSR has a penalty, I can't remember that one, but I don't think he does. Might be wrong, but if so, I think it's just him and Lemon who are without penalties.
Yeah, been driving a very good race from Lemon. He's been keeping it very consistent. A good change of form for him. Compared to how he used to drive, it's a good improvement across the season from him, and he'll be looking to improve on that possibly for season 17, sorry, to maybe get into a higher split than this than split 3, because when IE Pony and Collis, who were in here before, were driving, he was more than able to keep up with those two, same as Lassie. So they'll definitely be looking at that very probably tightly bound spot for F2 next season. It'll be very close to see who actually gets into the split and who doesn't next season. See Martin G, he's holding it around 6 tenths in this middle sector, and I do wonder if maybe at some point around his laps recently he has picked up a little bit of wing damage, because he doesn't seem to quite be able to pressure his Corny as much as he was able to before, especially through these middle and last sectors now.
Yeah, I can't really get a good look at the right front of his wing, so if he has any damage it will likely be there, although it seems pretty okay from the off-board camera. But he has dropped considerably further behind Corny than he was doing previously. Perhaps his tyre wear has sort of equalised a little bit with Corny. He has been having to run in dirty air for this whole time, so his fronts might have taken a little bit of a damage from having to do that, running in the dirty air of Corny up ahead. Well, Corny's basically had clean air the whole time, because as soon as he was about to have dirty air, the dirty air crashed out and went into the pits. So pretty fortunate for Corny in the Mercedes, and he really should be able to control this right now, as JSR actually sets the fastest lap of the race down there. Of course, he is on new Ultrasofts and no one and a much lighter fuel load than the Ultrasoft runners earlier in the race, so that's not all that surprising, but it's interesting to see. I'm not sure we've seen a JSR fastest lap before this point.
Definitely not for a while. And he's closing up very fastly on Assassin ahead. The next few laps he may be looking at a move here to try and get past him and pick up that P6 spot. That's quite a lot of points for him. As well for Assassin, obviously other drivers have made mistakes for him to be in this position, but it's still quite far up the points for him. So he is actually really struggling on those soft tyres at the moment. He's getting a lot of understeer on that setup, the same as we saw in quali. So he might be wanting to look at some slightly different setups in future. Maybe understeer his preference, but at the moment it doesn't really seem to be helping him all too much.
Every time I jump on board with him, he's inches away from clipping some wall that you don't really see any of the other drivers getting very close to touching. So I think you might be right that the understeer, even if it is his preference, probably isn't the way to go for the Sauber driver. And just as I jumped on board with him there, he was just going onto the bridge, and it really looked like he was about to lop off his left front Tom with another penalty down there in 8. So that actually bodes very well for Assassin, as he almost hits the outside edge onto the bridge. But then again, maybe he has this all under control. Maybe I'm just overreacting, and maybe I'm looking at it with the wrong perspective, and he actually knows exactly where he's going to be as he clips the wall going into the final sector here and around the final 2 corners. Keeps that one on the road there nicely, but perhaps doesn't keep the same sort of pace that some of the other drivers would be able to do, as JSR is actually closing up pretty heavily on him here. Meanwhile, I'm going to jump aboard with Martin G as he sends a big type out the inside of Corny, pushes Corny wide. He's going to have to give that position up because that was out of nowhere there. Corny will not be best pleased with that one, as Martin G actually still looking to put the traction down, but he gets a bit of oversteer, and that does mean he will have to stick behind Corny. Corny will go defensive into this left hand, and no, Martin G actually threatens the inside and goes all the way around the outside. Perhaps here he's actually really forcing his nose in there, actually forced over the curb in the end. There's not really room for 2 drivers through there, and Corny does hold on to that position, which I think is probably the way it should have been. Meanwhile, JSR was able to make that move onto Assassin. I assume that was into turn 4, and he'll be able to drive away now and up after Suisse, and actually there's still a fair few laps to go, so he might just be able to close up to the back of him, depending on whether he's able to maintain the pace we've been able to see from him earlier.
Yeah. It seems Martin G maybe getting slightly frustrated behind that Mercedes Corny now. He's found some pace again. He was struggling slightly earlier, and he now seems to be able to keep it relatively close, and I'd hope be looking for a much cleaner move this lap. Yeah, he seems to be getting very frustrated. Maybe it's with the length of this race. The concentration is starting to wear off for him though, as well, as we see. He hasn't done that. He's run slightly wide through turn 3. Relatively okay though. You can get a decent exit, and then round turn 4, opening the DRS, and he's not going to be close enough for an overtake on this lap because of that messy few corners. So he'll be looking to improve that on the next few laps. But he does get very close to the braking zone again, braking up a lot later than Corny at this moment in time, and he'll be using that to his advantage on the next few laps, knowing that Corny will brake early if he goes for a move. So he'll be using that.
Yeah, no, I thought he was going to just go flying into the back of Corny there. The rate at which he closed up to him there was absolutely extraordinary, but Corny seems to have it all under control, but it is looking more and more likely that Martin will be able to make a move at some point if he can just keep turns 2 and 3 clean. Goes for a little bit of a tighter line on the exit of the hairpin there, maybe looking to see if he can make moves elsewhere on the track, but it would take quite a significantly better run, as Lemon actually sets the fastest lap of the race, and he's really building up a big gap to Lasser now behind. Not that he needs to because of the penalty, but that is, he's really started to turn it on just out of nowhere. Maybe he's starting to use, his ERS mode has gone below 50% for the first time I've seen it this race. So yeah, maybe he's just finally decided to turn it on, and he's just been playing with his food this whole time and not really showing everyone exactly what he's able to do. But that's a very impressive thing for him to do on 16-lap-old soft tires.
Yep. That puts him in a great position to get that Grand Slam that I'm sure he was going for as well. So Martin G looks about close enough into turn 1 here. He needs to through turn 1 and 2. Is he going to keep it neat through turn 3 this time? He's kept it neater than he did last night. Corny getting a decent exit though. Into turn 4, he's going to want to get a good exit out of here. Corny does usually tend to be quite good out of here as he clouts the wall on the left there. He may just be close enough into this next corner though. Corny's going to go defensive. He's going to have to brake very late. He knows he can. But Corny also brakes late and he gives him a big whack there and immediately goes back to leaving him the space and gives up the position there seemingly. And Martin G is now ahead onto that podium position. Corny may be looking to fight it back, but I don't think he quite has the pace at the moment to be battling as closely as he would like to be.
And now he's got 5 laps to make sure that Martin G does not get 3 seconds ahead of him, I believe, because I believe Corny does have a corner cutting penalty, and Martin G, I think, has 2 of them. So he just needs to keep him within that 3-second gap, and he will know. Even if he doesn't know about the exact penalty situation, he'll still be thinking that he has to keep him within 3 seconds ahead of him, because that's just the mentality you have to get when so many people tend to get penalties, as we've seen on this game. Meanwhile, Tom has also made his way up past RR Assassin, who's really struggling on those 19-lap-old tyres, but Hazard seems to be having several dramas right at the back of the field as he's dropping further and further behind in sort of chunks of time that he's losing to the cars ahead. So I think Assassin will be nailed on for 8th place here and still a pretty decent points haul, just by keeping it clean and making sure he didn't retire from the race.
Yeah. As you see at the moment, Tom is doing quite well to hold a gap to JSR, who's on his ultra softs, and JSR is actually closing up on Swiss for P5, so they may begin start battling within the next few laps, maybe even this lap if he gets a good run through the first few corners. You see Swiss has actually gone quite wide there because of his wing damage. I'd imagine on that right hand side it will really affect him through those last few corners. It's also going to affect him through turn 1 and 3, and as we see, I think that might have been a lag spike there from Swiss's perspective. JSR intelligently decides to back out of the Ghost because being inside enough. See Swiss again really struggling for that with that wing damage. JSR will definitely be looking for a move here as Swiss decides not to battle it. It's not really his race anymore. And at 5th place, very nicely.
Yeah, Swiss will be very much in a damage control mentality. And Corny, oh no, he gets another 3-second time penalty. That means that he's on, I believe, the same amount of penalties as Martin G now, assuming he gets rid of that 5-second stop and go. So that means that he is once again battling on track with the McLaren driver up ahead, and that's not going to be good news for him because he was looking strong for actually getting that podium position, but he seems to have lost his head a little bit and he's just not been able to keep it properly on track. He is still staying very close behind Martin G though, so it doesn't look like Martin G actually has that much pace over him, despite having been nailed to the back of him for so long. But that's interesting. Anyway, yes, Swiss, he'll be looking not to battle with any of the drivers that go past him with the hopes that he can remain ahead of Assassin as Hazard's actually into the pits. And he's going to ruin Lemon's Grand Slam, I think. He's coming out on those hyper soft tyres, and I think he's going to be stealing that fastest lap away very, very cruelly from Lemon. But Hazard was repeatedly falling back further and further away from the 8th position driver Assassin. So I think that makes sense just to salvage something out of this race. He may as well try and get the fastest lap. Tom now really close to the back of Swiss through here, and once again having a bit of a lag moment there with Swiss as he actually goes into the backside of the Red Bull driver, who actually just completely backs out of it once again, and I think is giving Tom this corner. Yeah, he's not really fighting that into turn 1, and Tom is up the order and up into 6th place now.
Yep. His next concern may be Assassin, who at the moment has closed that gap to him, so he's going to have to be thinking about Assassin. And he might be falling down to 2nd to last, which, bearing in mind at one point in this race he was battling for that podium, he will be not very happy about, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and the way he lost his front wing damage as well really didn't seem like it was his fault. I think it's just Hazard running wide and into the wall, and then there was nowhere for Swiss to go, so that really is unfortunate for the Red Bull driver after what had seemed to be a pretty strong race.
Yeah. And Corny, surprisingly, has actually managed to keep relatively close to Martin G, but not quite close enough to be making a difference. And Assassin is actually now within a second of Swiss, and that's very good for Assassin. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Sweet if he falls into second to last, possibly coming into the pits and trying to steal a fastest lap. Though, if he doesn't come in this lap, I don't think he has enough time to go for a fastest lap, so he may be staying out.
Yeah, probably, I would imagine, will indeed be staying out. Just taking a quick look at the penalties there, just to confirm that Corny and Martin G do indeed have the exact same amount of penalties. Tom, of course, has quite a lot of penalties to his name, so if Assassin is able to keep within, I believe, 6 seconds of Tom, I think Assassin only has one 3-second time penalty, whereas Tom has, I think, 3. So Assassin might well be able to inherit that position from Tom, as actually he's right behind Suisse now, and he's actually going to make the move into turn 1 once again. Suisse, once again, really not battling it there as the Sauber driver goes up his inside, and that will be pretty satisfactory for Assassin as he moves himself back up into 7th place and really is looking at a very strong points finish.
That's great for Assassin, the British driver. He'll be looking to bring this home now and take that 7th place, and oh, my maths was wrong as well. Sweet could pit at the end of this lap and go for fastest lap if he felt like it. Obviously, he may be thinking just to make it to the end of the race now. He doesn't want to take too many risks because, of course, he will lose something if he crashes out going for fastest lap. He will lose one position. It seems, yeah, the only cars relatively close on track are Corny now, to the back of Martin G, as we see Hazard taking the fastest lap there of 36.2. And the gap out front has seemed to just grow again after that fastest lap from Lemon. He's managed to just very much ease that lead out, as you see Corny actually made a mistake there, and has now fallen out of the DRS of Martin G, so he might be out of that battle for the rest of the race now, unfortunately for him. Unless Martin G picks up another penalty, he should probably be settling in for that 4th place now.
Yeah, and 4th place, not as bad as it could have been after a relatively poor qualifying performance, and then a bit of a tough early race at least, because he did have to change his front wing in the pits, let's not forget, and had to run a significant amount of the race for the first 5 or 6 laps or so without some of his front wing components. So 4th will be pretty good after that start to the race, certainly for Corny, because really he just needs to keep scoring consistent points. He's got such a big buffer up front at the moment, provided Ramdrop doesn't restart attending races, which of course he might well do. He might come back and just steal the championship once again, but it's not looking all that likely at the moment. So Corny has such a big buffer that he really just needs to make sure he's getting decent points finishes in all of the remaining races, and that should be enough to see him over the line, particularly if Lasser and Lemon keep splitting the wins between them, as it seems like might well be the case. And of course Martin G on a cleaner day might well have had the pace to battle with those up front as well, but now he's actually 27 seconds behind the lead pairing, as now I'm going to jump on board with Lemon for the final lap of the race, give him this sort of lap of honour here as he goes around. Don't want to commentate his curse him, he hasn't won it yet, of course. Something could well go horribly wrong on the final lap, but I sincerely hope it doesn't, because I'd really like to see Lemon bring this one home, as he's keeping it well away from the wall there in turn 3. He's not taking any chances whatsoever.
Yeah. He's running on a high RS deployment at the moment, so it's interesting to see. Maybe he's just trying to use it up before the end of the race, but I don't think on the... He's a fast driver, but I don't think on his dead soft he's really going to be fighting in the low 36s for a fastest lap. And his mind really should be on making the end of the race here, if anything. Giving him this lap of honour. You can see he's driving very well. He's on all the right parts of the racetrack. He's keeping it very clean, hitting all the braking points as he misses his braking point. Yeah, and he's driven very well in this race, and it's a more than deserved win for him.
Absolutely, yep, provided he does indeed win it, as yep, he's keeping well clear of everything which could possibly cause him any sort of danger. He's not looking like he's going to pick up any penalties as well. Keeping it very neat into the inside of this corner. Doesn't look like anywhere else on the track there's going to be anything too close to a battle forming. Corny's not really closing up to the back of Martin G, and so here through the last chicane and now up to the last couple of corners, here's Lemon as he actually clips the wall a little bit going around here, but that's just for style, I think, as he comes across the line and wins in AOR. A really dominant race in the end from Lemon. Great stuff to see him take home the win here with a really clean drive. Lasser coming home in second, drops down to 10 seconds behind him at the end, really emphasising Lemon's dominance. because of that 3-second penalty, dropping him from 7 to 10 seconds behind. Meanwhile, it's going to be a little while before we see Martin G coming up to end his race. Hazard has, of course, actually finished his race as well because he was a lap behind the leaders, and I doubt Lemon will be too happy about having his Grand Slam taken away from him by Hazard. As here comes Martin G. He is going to take the final podium position as Corny comes across the line behind him, getting that extra bit of time added on for the unserved stop-go. That will probably be removed, but nonetheless, I think he is still going to be behind Martin. JSR now, he looked like he was going to take the fastest lap for a little while and actually had a pretty decent charge through the field there, and actually comes very close to the back of Corny based on all those penalties. Tom coming across the line as well, not a particularly clean race from him. It didn't really get going after that poor jump start mistake he had there right at the beginning, so an unfortunate race for him in the McLaren. Assassin comes across the line getting some decent points in 7th. Suisse coming home in 8th despite having to limp all the way round for the last few laps. And that is all for the Singapore Grand Prix.
Yeah, that was a good race as terms of Singapore go. Relatively close battle up front for some parts of the race, and then Lemon managed to pull out that gap. And yeah, some good battles throughout the field.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we're not going to be able to have any interviews after the end of this race, sadly, but I'm afraid I have somewhere I need to be, so I'm not going to be able to stick around much longer. But so sorry about that in advance, and sorry to the drivers as well. I'm sure they'd love to give their opinions. Of course, they could come into the chat and give their opinions if they wanted. Just here's the final summary of the results here. Lemon in first, penaltyless, coming across the line, having spent 52 minutes completing the race here around Singapore. Lasser and Martin G rounding out the podium with quite a lot of penalties to their name. JSR the only other, and Hazard actually also without penalties, although can't exactly say that he had a clean race. JSR the only other driver other than Lemon to maintain a clean race here and gets himself a decent points haul in 5th. Tom in 7th, Tom in 6th, Assassin 7th, Suisse 8th, Hazard 9th, and Enigma and Marion will, I don't think they'll be picking up any points because they DNF'd, but Enigma might still pick up that 1 point for 10th position.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you very much for joining me today, Hayden. It's been a massive help. Very glad I didn't have to do this one all on my own. It would have been quite challenging indeed. And thank you as well to all of the sponsors who kindly allow us to, or who kindly support AOR and allow us to run so many streams on so many different platforms for all of your enjoyment. So thank you everyone for watching. And any parting comments, Hayden?
No, just thank you for giving me the opportunity to commentate.
Absolutely no problem. I'd love to have you back at some point. Anyway, that will be all from us. So thank you very, very much for watching, everyone. Goodbye.